for Milky Way. Remember, the core word of galaxy is milk, milkiness, and it's only given to Milky Way. But still, you might be wondering, why do we still use it? So basically, the answer is that astronomers and astrophysicists are very lazy to come up with a new word. So now this word is like stuck. So for even any deep sky objects that satisfy the criteria of being a galaxy is called a galaxy now. Next. So here is one more question, a nebula or a galaxy. But before that, let me talk about some scientific history. So before 1920s, astronomers, philosophers, and even astrophysicists used to believe that the extent of the universe or the scale of the universe is the Milky Way itself. That and there is nothing beyond Milky Way. But these astronomers were able to see Andromeda. Today we now know it's a galaxy and it's very far away from us. But at that time, these astronomers used to tell, if you look in the image, they used to call them as nebulas. Nebulas are giant gas clouds, basically, that form stars. They are factories that produce star in layman terms. So what they told that these Andromeda Nebula are basically in our own Milky Way. They're inside our own Milky Way, and they're part of us. So next slide. But there were many philosophers, many astronomers, and astrophysicists who gave up their own proposals and theories against this notion that our universe is Milky Way galaxy itself. Such was Immanuel Kant during 17th and 18th century. He made a proposal that these objects or these so-called nebulas are basically like our own Milky Way galaxy itself, and they are very far away from us and do not have any direct relation to us. And he coined them as island universe. So he was correct on his part that they are very far away from us. Next. Next, we'll go to pre-World War One, where we had Westo Slipher. Westo Slipher started to do spectrographic studies of the stars present in these spiral nebulas. But he found out that something is wrong, that the stars or the spiral nebula itself had a huge Doppler shift. What do you mean by huge Doppler shift? Basically, it told him that the galaxy or the stars present in this particular so-called nebula are moving at a very, very, very fast rate than the stars present in our own Milky Way. Now, here is some contradiction happening because we are considering that this nebula is a part of our own Milky Way itself. Hence, the velocity of the stars in the nebula or the nebula itself should have same comparable values of other stars. But here was no case like this. These stars had velocities which was very much immense than the stars present in our galaxy. So 3 years later, next please. 3 years later, it was Herbert Curtis who was inspired by Westo Slipher's prediction, and he started to measure brightness of novae. Novae are basically beautiful explosions that are happening around the night sky when a particular star dies. So he started to measure these novae in Andromeda Nebula, and he found out that they were very fainter than those which occurred in our own galaxy or in our own Milky Way. So what he did, he started to calculate distances to these galaxies or so-called nebula. And he found out that the distances to these nebula is much more greater than the diameter of our own galaxy. So, which is another contradiction. How can something be there in our own galaxy and still be very far away from us, greater than the diameter itself? So, but there was a big problem over here. Many people didn't appreciate Herbert Curtis' work because his method to use novae to calculate distances was not appropriate, kind of. Next, please. So it was Edwin Hubble. Edwin Hubble did the same thing. He also tried to calculate differences. But what he did is basically instead of taking brightness from these novas, he started to take brightness from Cepheid variable stars. Now, what are Cepheid variable stars? Basically, these stars have intensity or brightness changing according to a particular time period. So he was able to calculate accurate distances to these nebulas, and he found out the same data as Heber Curtis did with some minor differences. And hence, even now, people were able to appreciate the work done by Heber Curtis and Edwin Hubble. So here is one small image of RS Puppis, which is a Cepheid variable star basically. So next, please. Here is a my own personal dedication to Henrietta Swan Leavitt. So she was the one who formulated the formula or the distance modulus formula, which you can see on the left hand side. So it is m difference of m minus capital M. M is your apparent magnitude or the magnitude or the brightness you are getting from a particular star, and capital M is your absolute magnitude. What is absolute magnitude? It is nothing but apparent magnitude, but at this time, the star is 10 parsecs away from you. Parsec is nothing but 3.26 light years. So you keep an object at the object you want to calculate distance to at the distance of 10 parsecs and then calculate its brightness. So that difference is basically nothing but minus 2.5 times logarithmic of d by 10, where d is the actual distance to that particular object, and it is always given in parsecs. Next, please. Now, let's move on to the main topic of this talk, the galaxy morphological classification. So it was again the great Edwin Hubble who developed the classification scheme for galaxy morphology on the basis of their structure. And today we call his classification scheme as Hubble sequence to honor him. Now the data which Hubble gathered during 10 years, basically, he started to divide these galaxies in three main types. So what were the three main types? Elliptical, spiral, lenticular. I'll explain the asterisks on lenticular later on. As well as he was able to discover irregular galaxies, but he never mentioned them in his classification system. Why? Because the word is telling you something, that they are irregular. And remember, Hubble classification system is completely based upon structure. And as these galaxies do not have any definite structure, how are you going to classify them in Hubble sequence? So Hubble never even classified irregular galaxies in Hubble sequence. That was the main reason. So next, please. So here we are at a very famous tuning fork diagram. On your screens, you can basically see a tuning fork, basically an instrument that we used to use in our 11th grade in physics lab. And on that tuning fork, there are some galaxies present. I want you to focus on the arms of the tuning fork or the right hand side section. This section is completely given to spiral galaxies. The top arm, which you can see, are the unbarred spiral galaxies. What are unbarred? I'll explain you in detail. And the bottom one are barred spiral galaxy. Just in short line, if I have to explain, the barred spiral galaxies will have a bar, and the above, which are unbarred, will never have a bar or a segment at the center of the galaxy. I'll explain this in detail, don't worry. Let's move on to the left-hand side of the tuning fork diagram. So left-hand side is basically given to elliptical galaxies. Elliptical, they are telling you they are ellipsoidal in nature. And these are denoted by E0, E3. I'll explain this in detail. Don't worry about this. And now look at the middle of the tuning fork, where it is given as 0. What are these? These galaxies are basically lenticular galaxies. Why they are given at the middle of the tuning fork? The reason is that these galaxies have properties or characteristics similar to both elliptical as well as spiral galaxies. So next, please. Let's move on to our first type of galaxy, elliptical. As the name is suggesting, these are ellipsoidal in nature. As you can see in this image of M105, M stands for Messier catalogs. Catalogs are basically like your school or institute registers, which register each and every student. So these catalogs also register each and every galaxy present in the universe. So under Hubble classification system, Elliptical galaxies are denoted by capital letter E, and it is further rated from 0 to 7, which is basically based on their ellipticity. What is ellipticity? If you know about 11th standard coordinate geometry, it is kind of like eccentricity, but it is a different measurement which calculates the same thing. How much non-circular your particular ellipse is. So next, please. So the integers that I was talking about earlier, from 0 to 7, these are called basically degree of ellipticity. And degree of ellipticity is always 10 times that of actual ellipticity, which is given by eta. So the formula, short formula you have over here, n is equal to 10 times of eta. N basically is your degree of ellipticity, and eta is your ellipticity. And ellipticity is defined by nothing but 1 minus b by a. If you know your 11th standard coordinate geometry, it is quite similar to your eccentricity, where eccentricity is epsilon square is equal to 1 minus b by a bracket square. B by a, B is your semi-minor axis and A is your semi-major axis. Now, can you please take 2 slides back? Yeah. Now, I want to focus at elliptical galaxies again. We are going from E0 to E7, from 0 to 7. What does 0 tell you? That this galaxy has basically very, very less ellipticity or no ellipticity at all. So the structure of this galaxy will be near circular. As you can see below the E0, it is circular in nature. As you go from 0 to 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, basically it will tell you what? Ellipticity is increasing. So what will happen now? Your along a galaxy that you're looking at will get more and more elongated. So finally at E7, where ellipticity is very much high, you'll find a galaxy which is highly elongated. Next, Ranjan. Yeah. Now a little bit more about elliptical galaxies. So these galaxies have very less interstellar gas. And if you have attended Gaurav Bhaiya's lecture a few months back, gas is highly essential to form stars. And hence they will also predict the rate of star formation, the rate at which stars are being produced in that particular galaxy. If you have very low gas that will produce star, obviously the rate of star formation will also decrease. Again, you have less amount of gas, so now you know that they will obviously lack younger and hotter stars. So younger and hotter stars, which are bluish in color, they basically need lot of amount of gas to be formed. So these stars will never be formed or will hardly be formed, very hardly. And hence these galaxies will be much more dominated by much more evolved or reddish or yellow color star. Okay, move on. Okay, now let's talk about galaxy cluster first. What are galaxy clusters? It's basically a cluster where you have lots of galaxy, hundreds of them. So now these hundreds of galaxies will merge with each other, and they will merge and they will form elliptical galaxies. This is how elliptical galaxies are actually formed, by merging. Two galaxies merge and they form elliptical galaxy. Now, if you have lot of galaxies which are merging each other, obviously the final galaxy that will be formed, which will be obviously elliptical galaxy, it will be very much big in size. Its size will be huge, and hence some elliptical galaxies form something called as supergiant elliptical galaxies, just like this image, which is IC1101. IC stands for index catalog over here, which is another type of catalog. And this galaxy is present in the center of a galaxy cluster called Abell 2029. So next, please. Now, here is famous image for all of you. This is Messier 87 of type E0. So basically, this tells you that it is near circular, as you can see in the image. And it was also reddish yellowish in color. Forget the blue ray that is coming out. That is actually a jet coming from the supermassive black hole present in the center. Forget about it. So next, please. Let's move on to my personal favorite, spirals. I guess everybody likes spiral galaxies. So spirals were first mentioned by Edwin Hubble himself back. So these were mentioned in his work, The Realm of Nebula, from where I've stole my title as well. So spiral galaxies, as everyone knows, are famous for one thing, the spiral arms. But but people don't understand that these spiral arms will be meaningless if these galaxies do not have one aspect, that is the flat rotating disk. Let's take example of a pizza. Consider that your pizza is a spiral galaxy. So the toppings on the pizza are basically your spiral arms and whatever matter is present in your spiral arms. So what will be your flat rotating disk will be the crust of the base. Now consider that the crust of the pizza is not very good. How will be the pizza be nice or be delicious? Obviously, you need that crust to be perfect. So in the same way, you need that flat rotating disk to be proper so that these spiral arms will be properly situated around that particular disk. Let's move on. Now, spiral galaxies are again divided into two types. One is unbarred spiral galaxies, which are donated by capital S A, capital S B, capital S C. And then they are again divided in barred spiral galaxies, which are denoted by capital S, capital B, small a, capital. You can also call them SBA directly, does not matter. SBB or SBC. So there is some difference in denotation. The capital B. Capital B is telling you what? The presence of a bar. Now let's move, look at Pinwheel Galaxy, the above image. So now take any spiral arm and follow the pointer. Now what will pointer will show you that this spiral arm is nicely winding up to the center of the galaxy. And there are some deformations happening, but it is nicely winding up to the galactic nucleus or galactic center, and nothing is happening. Now take a look at this galaxy, the barred spiral galaxy, which is called NGC 1300. NGC stands for New General Catalog, by the way. Take the bottom spiral arm, follow the pointer. What is happening? It is perfectly winding, but at one point it stops and it starts to form this a bar, and this bar is now connecting the central nucleus, and then again it comes out of the central nucleus and then again forms a spiral arm. So what are we looking over here? The presence of a bar or a segment which is connecting the central nucleus to the spiral arms. And this is the main difference between a barred spiral galaxy and unbarred spiral galaxy. So you should remember this, that this is the main difference. If anybody asks you what is the difference between unbarred and barred spiral galaxies, you should be able to tell that barred spiral galaxies have a bar or the segment connecting the nucleus to the spiral arms, while in unbarred, the spiral arms are directly winding up to the center. So let's next, please. So now, how are we going to classify them? The classification depends on two things: spiral arms as well as central nucleus. We'll talk about spiral arms first. So basically, you can see some flow chart over here, which is showing SA to SB to SC, or in more easy ways to tell, it is moving from alphabet A to B to C. But what it is telling you, if you go from alphabet A to B to C, the tightness of spiral arms are decreasing. The spiral arms are becoming much more free in nature. The tightness is decreasing. They're losing them, loosen up. The same way is happening in what do you say, unbarred spiral galaxy as well as in barred spiral galaxy. But you will say, Devang, I'm not able to understand the flowchart. So let's move on to some pictures. Next, please. So you're looking right now at Black Eye Galaxy under the classification SA. Remember that this is SA. It's very important, okay? Now, look at the spiral arms. The spiral arms are very tightly winded around the central nucleus. The white spot in the middle is basically your central nucleus, and around it you have these spiral arms which are tightly winded. Now we'll go from alphabet A to B or SA to SB. What will happen? The spiral arms should become much more free, or the tightness should decrease. Now, even though we have a different galaxy over here, NGC 3982, but what we can see over here, If you try to look very closely and compare it with the previous galaxy, the spiral arms have decreased significantly. The tightness of spiral arms have decreased significantly. And now if we are looking at a SB galaxy, SB type of galaxy, now we'll go to SC type of galaxy. What should happen? The tightness of spiral arms should again decrease. Welcome back to Penwell galaxy. So now you can see over here that the tightness of spiral arms have decreased a lot as compared to the previous two images. And also that it has become much more free in nature and it is not very bounded to something. Now, these were examples of unbarred spiral galaxies. Let's have a look at barred spiral galaxy. Do the same thing works in a barred spiral galaxy? Welcome to M95 and NGC 1365. M95 is SBA type and NGC 1365 is SBC type. So you can now try to look closely at SBA. You can see there are two spiral arms. These spiral arms are tightly binded to the central nucleus. Now go from alphabet A to alphabet C. What is happening? The spiral arms or the tightness of spiral arms have decreased a lot. I mean, it's a beautiful image of this galaxy, basically. You can see how free in nature these arms have become. They're so much free compared to the M95. So this is the main difference we can see in unbarred as well as barred spiral galaxies. Next, please. I hope that everybody understood how do we classify them under tightness of spiral arms. Now let's look at central galactic nucleus. How do we classify them? And by looking at its central galactic nucleus or even center. We try to look at the extent of the central nucleus or the size of the central nucleus. Now, if you go from again SA, SB, SC or SBA, SBB, SBC or even alphabet A, B, C, the size of the central nucleus or the extent of central nucleus should decrease. So the size should diminish from A to B and again diminish from B to C. Let's have a look at more images. Next, please. We welcome to Sombrero Galaxy, by the way. M104 SA type. Now you can look at the brightness of the central part. You can clearly tell how big the central part is. Now we'll go from SA to SB. What should happen? Remember, central nucleus size will decrease. Welcome to our sister galaxy, Andromeda. Now look at the central part. It has decreased very significantly, actually, as compared to the previous one. Now we'll go from SB to SC. What should happen again? The central part should decrease even more. Now you can see the pointer is completely overlapping the central part. Welcome, by the way, to Silverado NGC 3370. So now there's one more question you will ask. That right now for these images, we are seeing that the size of the central nucleus is decreasing as we go from A to C. Do the tightness of the spiral arms will also decrease for these type of example? Yes, you are clearly seeing if you went in Sombrero, spiral arms were very, very tight. If you went through Andromeda, basically the tightness decreased a lot. And now you're at Silverado, the tightness have even decreased. So both are applicable. It's not like these galaxy only size of central nucleus will be applicable or this particular condition will be applicable. Another condition is not applicable. No, both are applicable, but for easy explanation, I've used them differently. Next slide, please. Now, same case for barred spiral galaxies, the famous bars. We have taken the same example. Now look at the central nucleus again. It is very big as compared to the SBC one. It's very small. So the size of the central nucleus is decreasing, basically. Next slide, please. Now, I've shown you many images, basically. Now you will be asking, Devang, what about our own house, our own Milky Way? Basically, it is very difficult to tell the structure of our own Milky Way. Why? Because we are living inside it. And hence, it is difficult to comprehend what is the exact structure of these Milky Ways. And now, but actually during 1960s, there were some astronomers who were able to gather some data from radio telescopes and they were able to tell that Milky Way is basically has a structure similar to that of Barred spiral galaxy. Barred spiral galaxy tells you what they have a bar or this central segment, but it was just a hypothesis. They had no enough amount. They had no enough amount of data to claim their hypothesis. So in 2005, NASA sent Spitzer Space Telescope, and it gathered a lot of amount of data about the structure of our own galaxy. And we were able to confirm that these astronomers in 1960s were actually correct. Our galaxy is a barred spiral galaxy. Now, how do we classify our own galaxy? Basically, there is one more problem over here. Our galaxy cannot be classified for A, for B, or even C. Why? Because our galaxy structure is kind of intermediate between SBB and SBC, or alphabets B and C. It's kind of intermediate between them. So hence, astrophysicists decided to name or give the classification of a galaxy as capital S, capital B, and small b and C. So which small b and C is telling you that we are intermediate between these alphabets or the properties basically. Next slide, please. So we are looking at a diagram of our own galaxy. As you can see, the central part, we have a bar structure, okay, which confirms that we are a barred spiral galaxy. Move on, please. Let's move on to my secondary personal favorite, lenticulars. As I said, these galaxies have characteristics to both ellipticals as well as spiral galaxies. So, what properties do they or characteristics do they have? So, basically, for galax for in case of spiral galaxies, they have this disk. As I told you, the pizza example, disk is necessary, and these galaxies have that disk, but they do not have any spiral arms or any kind of structure that will resemble a spiral arm, but they have rings and shells like structure. As you can see in this image of NGC 2787, the brownish color thing is basically a ring around the central part. And now, what characteristics do they have that they are representing elliptical galaxies as well? Is that central bulge, that central white spot has properties similar to that of elliptical galaxies. So that's why we are telling that these galaxies have both the characteristics of spiral as well as ellipticals. Please move on. Now, in under Hubble sequence, they are denoted by S0 and they're given subscript 1 and 2. And also we can see our bar structures over here. So right now, the two images at the bottom do not have a bar, as you can clearly see. Welcome to NGC 1387 and ESO our 381-12. ESO is European Southern Observatory Catalog, by the way. The classes of these galaxies, which do not have any bar actually, is given as S01, S02, and S03, where numbers tell you amount of dust that is present in these galaxies, basically. As you can see in NGC, there are rings, and while in ESO, there are shells around the central part. Next, please. Now we have lenticular galaxies with a bar. Now you can see in both the examples of NGCs 1460 and 1533, there is a bar present at the center. So basically, these are classified as SB01, SB02, and SB03. Again, talking more about lenticular galaxies, they have very less interstellar gas, hence low rate of star formation. They will not hardly produce any blue stars or young or hotter stars, and dominated by reddish yellow stars. Next, please. Now, critics of Hubble sequence. We saw beautiful Hubble sequence, which is classifying so many galaxies, but there is some critics behind it. So the first critic, actually there are many critics, but I am using only two critics for easy explanation. So the first critic is that basically the sequencing we are doing is based on visualization. You're looking at a particular galaxy, you're taking an image of a galaxy, then you're looking at the structure of the galaxy, and then you're classifying it into various classes. So visualization is missing out some key properties. And one of the key properties is rate of star formation. And hence, if it is missing out rate of star formation, it is missing out one type of galaxy, which is called starburst galaxy. I'll explain you more about starburst in a while. Irregular galaxies, I've already told you why they don't come in Hubble sequence, so I don't think more is needed about it. So the second point, which is the main point, what about those galaxies which are very, very, very far away from us? So these galaxies, or the light coming from these galaxies, is of very low intensity, and hence we will also low intensity, and we'll not able to get a clear picture of the galaxy. So if you don't have a clear picture, what will happen? You will not able to tell a definite structure of it. And as we'll not be able to tell a definite structure of these galaxies, we won't be able to classify them. So this is one of the major drawbacks of Hubble sequence. So let's move on. But Hubble sequence is still in use. I mean, Hubble is the great guy. He he made sure that there is a base created for the classification of galaxy. Hubble sequence is the base when it comes to classifying galaxies. And Hubble sequence correlates with so many physical properties like color, like luminosity. And basically, Hubble was a very interesting person. He was a major in the US Army. He was even a professional boxer and used to love smoking a lot. So let's move on. So we have other type of galaxies that I would like to discuss: irregular, dwarf, and starburst. So let's move on with irregulars. So irregulars, I've already explained that they are irregular. So one more thing I would like to add, that they are prone to gravitational effects. So basically, they will be ripped apart or they will merge with another large galaxy. This keeps on happening with when it comes to irregular galaxies. So you can see image of NGC 1427A. So basically, this galaxy is irregular. It does not have a structure which will allow it to classify either as elliptical, spiral, or lenticle. But has a structure like an arrowhead, basically. Now, dwarf galaxies basically, um, dwarf is not Lord of the Rings dwarf, but same analogy. So dwarf means they are small and they have very less amount of stars present in them, and basically they are small galaxies which surround other larger galaxies. So if you have one large galaxy, you'll always find one or even more than that, sometimes four, five, six, any number of dwarf galaxies. So what will happen to these dwarf galaxies? They will be ripped apart by the immense gravitational pull of the larger galaxy, or they can even merge with that galaxy. So we have some common types in dwarf galaxies like elliptical, irregular, spiral, and Magellanic type dwarfs, which are given by their own separate classification. You can see in the slides. So here is one example of small Magellanic Clouds, our nearest neighbor to our Milky Way. And also, let's move on to the next slide. And now we are looking at Large Magellanic Cloud, which is also a neighbor basically, and it is classified as SBM. If you try to look, it looks irregular at first, but if you try to look even more closely, it has some spiral structure. There is one where the pointer is right now. It is like small spiral arm, and the above spiral arm is much more, prominent in nature or much more longer in nature. And there is also a bar central segment at the whitish part. It tells you. So next, please. Now, my another favorite, Starburst. I like to call them galaxy on steroids, basically. Why steroids? Basically, the rate of star formation that is happening in this galaxy is at a very high scale. It is at an explosive rate. So, what is a starburst actually? Starburst is nothing but a phase that a galaxy has to go through, basically. But when does this phase come? This phase comes when a particular galaxy is undergoing a merger, a collision, or a close interaction with another galaxy. Then only it will come into a starburst phase and it will start to form a lot of stars. As you can see in the image of antenna galaxies, this image is showing you that there are two galaxies merging with each other right now. And hence, it is satisfying one condition that it is undergoing merger. Hence, we can see a lot of stars that are being formed in this galaxy. Next slide, please. Now, galactic collisions. Collision is a huge important part in every galaxy. Like it is like dinner of galaxy basically. They like to eat each other, and every galaxy has to go through some type of collision in their lifetime, and there is no vaccination for it basically. So galaxy collision is basically dependent on four factors: angle, momentum, number of galaxies, and size. I'll tell you more about momentum in the next slide. Next slide, please. So I have two videos. So Ranjan, the up video, top video. So can anybody confirm that you are able to pause it just for a second? Can anybody confirm that you are able to see the video?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. Okay. So now let it be paused, Ranjan. So we have two galaxies. One you can call as Milky Way and another one Andromeda. Now momentum will come over here. First, these galaxies will collide. Okay. The first collision is imminent. Nothing can stop that. But after the first collision, the momentum comes into picture. How much momentum do each of the galaxies have? If they have enough momentum to overcome the gravitational attraction or influence, these galaxies will fly apart after the first collision. But if they do not have enough momentum, these galaxies will keep on colliding and finally form a new type of galaxy, which is basically elliptical galaxy. So play the video, Rangan. As you can see, they are undergoing their first collision, but now, unfortunately, they do not have enough amount of momentum to overcome the gravitational attraction or influence. So they will again and again and collide. And finally merge to form this elliptical galaxy. You can pause it now, Ranjan. I hope. By the way, this is a major merger. What happens in a major merger? You have two galaxies which are of kind of equal sizes. So the end galaxy, the structure of the end galaxy or the end product is very, very different from the original galaxies. That is what basically happens in a major merger. Now, next video, please. Before this starts playing, I just want you to pause it first. Yeah. So what this simulation has done, they have taken real collisions that are happening, various stages of collision. There is one early stage, middle stage, and even post stages. And they have tried to combine it in a single simulation. Now let's check out that simulation. Play it, Ranjan. Yeah, that's it, I guess. You can stop. So let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. Currently, our own Milky Way galaxy is undergoing two mergers, which are minor in nature. In minor, what happens? One galaxy is way too big than other one. So the end product will be basically the larger galaxy with no significant deformation. But not so good story for the smaller galaxy. It will be completely ripped apart. So you have this image from UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, showing a merger of Sagittarius dwarf galaxy and Milky Way. Basically, you can see the dwarf galaxy in orange color, which is completely ripped apart. And you can see that Milky Way is kind of intact, same way. So let's move on to the next slide, please. You have this galaxy over here, another dwarf galaxy, Canis Major, which is merging with Milky Way. So hence again, it's a minor merger. Nothing much will happen over here. So You can move on to the next slide, Ranjan. So now let's talk about formation, how these formation actually started. So basically, we believe that after the dark ages are like dark ages in human history. Nothing much significant happened during that time. Let's not talk more about it. It's theoretical part. But after like first stars were formed, after like 100 millions of year after the first stars, you had the first galaxy formations, which were called as proto galaxies. Next slide, please. So to explain the formation of disk galaxy or the spiral ones, so as I said, for spiral disk is necessary. That crust has to be there in the pizza. So we have two models, top down, bottom up, also called as ELS, SZ model respectively. So I'll explain this in detail. Before that, next slide, please. To explain this, I've made an analogy basically. So I've considered a rice grain basically. Now consider this rice grain that it represents a gas cloud, mostly of hydrogen, and this gas cloud contains some stars. And this diameter of the gas cloud is basically thousands of light years. So this is just an analogy I'm trying to make for easy explanation. Okay, please. So let's move on to the next slide. So now, what does top-down model say? Or the top-down model given by astrophysicists Engen, Linden, and Sandage. That now collect all of these rice grains and make up a huge pile. So this pile represent your homogeneous gas cloud. Now, what these three astrophysicists told us that gravity and tidal forces start to act on this huge gas cloud. And what happens? Gravity makes sure that this pile of cloud, basically, or the gas cloud, is compacted nicely, and the tidal forces make sure that it gets some angular momentum. Next slide, please. So angular momentum and tidal forces and gravity acting upon it will take millions of years. And then it will start to form a kind of improper disk. As you can see, I've tried to depict it. It is forming a disk kind of structure. And all the other ice grain present around it is basically gas clouds thrown away due to the spinning nature of this gas cloud. Huge gas cloud, basically. Next, please. So finally, that you have a galaxy, not a galaxy, basically a proto galaxy, which has a proper disk. I'm telling you, disk is necessary to form either what do you say, spirals as well as lenticulars. So you have one disk, which will in for future will form spiral arms. I've not shown spiral arms over here because my motive was to show the disk formation. Next, more. Now, bottom-up theory. Now, it is very different from top-down theory. Top-down theory is telling you that there is one single gas cloud and it is compacting and spinning to form one particular galaxy, proto-galaxy. But the bottom-up theory is telling you that you have now globular galaxies. Now, globular galaxies have masses in the orders of globular clusters. Globular clusters are type of star clusters, which basically have a definite arrangement. So you have various numbers of globular galaxy. As you can see over here, there's no longer one single pile of rice grains. There are many different piles of rice grains. So now these globular galaxies will start to merge with each other. Next slide. So now you can see over here, the number of globular galaxies have decreased and also the sizes have much more increased as compared to the previous one. So if you go on to the next slide, you can see the number is decreasing more and more, and the size or the mass of that particular galaxy is also decreasing. By the way, the other ice grain present I've tried to show the collateral damage that is happening when two galaxies merge basically. Next slide, please. So again, same thing happens for millions of years. And then finally, if you go to the next slide, you have these two galaxies which have a proper disk, and also there is a lot of rice grains around them which show the collateral damage happened. So my motive was to show how the formation of this galaxy happened according to top down and bottom up theory. So I hope that everyone must have understood the basic difference between the top down and bottom up. Next, please. Now you have elliptical galaxies. How do they form? Basically, I've told you they are formed by merger of galaxies, other spiral galaxies, or even different galaxies, not only spiral, but any type of galaxy. So basically, I've seen one question that how much time do they take? It takes millions of years. It's not like within 1 year everything is done and whoosh. No, it takes millions of years. And finally, they form these elliptical galaxies. If they are in large clusters, and they can be very, very big. Next slide, please. Now, galactic evolution. Over here, I am not explaining a lot, but I just want to explain the formation of spiral arms. Now, please try to focus on this diagram. Okay. So basically, you now consider there are two stars in a spiral galaxy, which have eccentric orbits around the central black hole or something. And then what happens at some points, these two orbits will come very close to each other. As you can see, you take any two orbits, they will come very close to each other at 2 points basically. So now instead of having two stars, have n number of stars as well as have n number of planets and have interstellar gas and other sorts of matter. Their orbits will be concentrated at these parts, and these concentrated regions will resemble like a spiral arm. So spiral arm nothing but the concentrated regions of the eccentric orbits taken up by the matter present in the that particular spiral galaxy. If you want to read more about this, there is something called as density theory. I'll not go deep into it because personally I also don't know much about it. So these spiral arms are not permanent. Remember, they are changing. If you have a galaxy, a spiral galaxy, which is close to other small or even large galaxies, then the structure of spiral arms will always be different. Now, talking, I hope that everyone must have understood the nature of spiral arms or how do they come in existence. Now let's move on to elliptical and lenticular. Basically, again, the same story. Low interstellar gas, low rate of star formation, no blue or young stars, and whatever old stars they have, they will run out of fuel one day at one particular time in future, and they will die. It's basically a sad story. Next, please. Now let's talk about dark matter. Dark matter is highly essential for galaxy formation because it made sure that all the matter that is present at that time in the universe, some like 500 million years after the Big Bang, was came to each other, and hence they were able to form the first stars and the first galaxies in the universe. And without dark matter, this won't be possible, or there would be significant changes on how we are looking at a galaxy now. If there was even 1% change in the amount of dark matter present in the universe, the number of galaxies might have decreased or even increased. Depends on dark matter. But still, dark matter is very mysterious in nature. You don't know exactly what is dark matter or how it is interacting with ordinary matter. And that's the job of particle physicists at CERN, at Fermilab, and various other particle accelerators around the world. So let's move on. So now we are at the end, basically. I remember my childhood when I first saw this image of Galaxy on Windows XP. I was so fascinated by the image of it, that how beautiful and large such structure can be. So, in same way, all of you must have seen the first Galaxy, and you must be amazed by it. Same with our previous generation. And also, when Hubble produced his data that our galaxy is not the universe itself, and our universe even more larger than that, people were obviously became mad that how is this possible? But the data was correct, and they had to believe that. Truth is more stranger than fiction. So the discoveries made by Hubble, Shapley, Sandage, Vauquelin have to mean so many astrophysicists. You know, told us that basically you have a very, very violent universe out there. Violent, I not only mean destructive, where galaxies are colliding with each other, things are flying away here and there, but it is also constructive in some sense. that these galactic mergers or anything happening in any galaxy has given life. Life, I not only mean biological, but life in general sense to us or to the entire universe. Universe would be so dull without galaxies. And there would be no interest to study the universe at all or to even look at the night sky if there were no galaxies present. So next, please. We are at the end of the talk, but I want to talk about the references that I've used. Most of my images were from Wikipedia, and also majority of the data was from Wikipedia and the bottom book, Galaxy Morphology and Classification. Also, the animations taken were from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. And for theoretical aspects, you can also learn from PBS Spacetime and Dr. Becky YouTube channel. They have very nice YouTube videos for that. So now, the last thing, the Galaxy Morphology and Classification book by Berg von den Sydney. You should definitely read this. It is an amazing book, but I won't recommend this for beginners. It's kind of bit of advanced. So I would recommend the first four for beginners. Build up your base, and then if you think your base is built up, move on to the advanced stuff. Next, please. So thank you, and wherever you are, please be safe. Follow COVID guidelines. That's it. So now I'll take questions. So basically, I want you guys to unmute yourself, tell your names,
Yes,
and
yes. Thank you, Devang. That was a very informative talk. Now we can take the questions. So you can unmute yourself and ask the questions, and you can raise hands as well. Or if you are not able to unmute yourself, then you can ask questions in the chat box as well. So first up, we have Anirudh Samanshi.
hi.
Uh, Hello, Devang. First of all, let me tell you, my Devang is my brother over here. He gave a fantastic presentation.
Okay, that's great.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening.
So Devang, yeah, just actually, I was busy in my work and I joined the presentation late. So I didn't understand that much of what you said. I have read spiral and elliptical galaxies before. I just have a very practical theory that Andromeda galaxy is going to collide with our own Milky Way. So, what is the current scientist predictions that at what momentum it will be collecting us, and whether it's going to be spiral or whether it's going to be elliptical? What do
So
you
you're
think?
asking about the end product of the galaxy, right?
The end product of the galaxy.
It will be definitely elliptical, no doubt about it. It will not remain a spiral. Both of
Hmm.
them are spiral, so the end product has to be elliptical. Momentum, I cannot, but I can tell that momentum is not enough to overcome the gravitational attraction. But the exact value I cannot tell.
Okay. And what is the expected time in million years? Like
I
how much?
guess 3 or 4 billion years. I guess this is my guess actually, from where I've
Okay.
read. In 3 4 billion years, we should start to collide at the early
Okay.
stages.
And my second question is, I don't know whether you have covered this point or not. There is a void in whole universe where there is nothing like there is, I don't know what it's called. It's a void in the whole universe. So what do you think is like makes such kind of void? Is it the gravitational anomaly it's happening over there?
Basically, you must be talking about Boötes void, which is found in the constellation Boötes, if I'm not wrong. So
Hmm.
basically, these voids are basically formed due to dark matter itself. Dark matter is making sure that all the matter is coming close to each other, right? That galaxies clusters and galaxies are being formed. So now galaxies are
Hmm.
coming close to each other. So obviously, there will be some part present which will be not complete vacuum, but a vacuum or an empty state will be formed at that particular location.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I
Fine,
hope I have
Devang. It was very nice presentation. I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
Okay. Please keep
Anybody
the
else?
questions short so we can
Hello.
cover up all the questions. Yeah, next is Jyotiraditya.
Yeah, please.
Yes, so Devang, what actually makes starburst galaxy produce more stars? I
So
mean, the
basically, what
analogy
is
of
happening?
steroid.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So basically, what is actually the steroid? I have used it. Don't take it personally, just for making fun explanation. So the why they are producing stars at a huge rate. Basically, consider that you have two galaxies and they have a lot of amount of gas that will produce stars. Now these galaxies will collide, and hence If these galaxies are colliding, the gas is also colliding, right? Yes or no? Okay, I'll take as yes. So these
Okay.
gases are also
And
colliding with each other, and then these gas will be compacted, and hence they will start to form a lot of amount of gas. So it is basically
okay,
the
so does it
collision of the gases that is also being taking place, and hence, if you have lot of amount of gas that is being getting collided, then you have a lot of amount of stars that are being formed.
so does it mean that they are younger galaxies
Yeah,
basically?
yeah. Obviously, there has to be younger because now you have lot of amount of gas with you, right? Earlier, you have suppose like 5 units of gas, just an example, in one galaxy, and 5 units of gas in another galaxy.